I accidentally became a music teacher when I was about 14 years old. I was a decent violinist in middle school, and one day my band teacher pulls me out of class. She hands me an extra violin, she hands me sheet music, and she asks me if I can teach the new kid that's coming into the orchestra program how to play. I never taught a day in my life, but I figured, how hard could it be? Well, as you can imagine, a 14-year-old trying his first-handed teaching, I'm pretty sure I messed up that kid for life with the posture that I taught him. He was holding the violin like a pizza, and his body was all twisted, and it was not a good sight. If he ever becomes a professional violinist, I owe him an apology and many chiropractic appointments. Anyway, after crash coursing this kid on how to make noise on the violin, and it was not a good one, a couple days later, I walk into my band class, and this time she hands me a clarinet. I was an okay clarinet player in elementary school. I only played for about 1 or 2 years. But I figured, sure, I like being pulled out of class. So we can fast forward now to my first ever clarinet lesson, where I ruined another kid's musical foundation. About a week later now, as I'm walking into my orchestra class, really and truly hoping that I get to play the instrument I'm good at, which is the violin, I walk into my teacher's office, and there I see 2 saxophones, extra sheet music under them, and my teacher's menacing smile. So I thought to myself, am I the band teacher now? Is this part of a new thing I now have to do every time? And there was one problem, and quite a big one, is that with clarinets, I kind of knew how to play. With violin, I knew what I was doing, but with saxophone, I never played a saxophone a day in my life. I never even touched it. But my teacher, nonchalantly says, don't worry. I'll pull you out of class right now. I'll teach you how to play it, and I'll pull you out of the next class with a teacher's note, and you can actually, teach the kid how to play it. Long story short, I was terrified, but, I couldn't pass up the opportunity to skip 2 classes. This went on for weeks. And funnily enough, by the end of the school year, I had crash coursed students on every single instrument offered at that school. And even though I didn't feel confident in what I was doing, I started getting experience in something integral for every teacher. I started getting experience on how to break things down one tiny bite size at a time for someone first holding their instrument. When I turned 15, that same teacher offered me a student violin teaching position at an after-school program that she ran. I was thrilled. I ran to get a work permit. I showed up every Wednesday, and I took notes like my life depended on it. As a student violin teacher, I got to shadow other teachers, and I got to learn about what it's like to run a classroom and what makes a good instructor. Eventually, I proved myself good, so she awarded me by giving me my own violin teaching class where I was now the teacher. I continued to teach at that program, and when I turned 16, I got my driver's license. I went online and I printed business cards. Mr. Goran teaches violin, $20 an hour. I remember putting up yard signs and going to restaurants and giving them flyers, going door to door for hours, hoping that someone would get the flyer and I would get some clientele. And eventually I had about 5 to 6 students that I would begin seeing in their homes. A few months later, a local music store got a hold of my business card, and they called me because they were looking for a violin or piano teacher. They quickly asked me if I was up for the job, to which I said, yes, when can I start? And they said that there's an interview about 3 days from that day, and they told me to play anything that I can to showcase my skill on the instrument. I practiced for hours and hours, and I remember showing up about 30 minutes before the place opened. I sat in the parking lot, and I just played my violin to make sure I really have it down. And I'm really curious what the view was like from the outside. There's an empty parking lot, and there's just one car, and there's a guy playing the violin in the driver's seat. They must have thought I was crazy. Well, luckily for me, about 15 seconds into the interview, they told me I was hired, and what I later found out is they just wanted to make sure that I knew how to play the instrument before embarking on teaching it. Nonetheless, I was now driving home, very excited because I had my after-school violin teaching job once a week. I was teaching students in their homes throughout the week for about 5 kids, and now I was a violin and piano teacher at a local music store. And it was at that music store that I saw something that took me by surprise. Week after week, I watched as kids, 7, 8, 9-year-olds, would come into their lesson looking anxious. Their shoulders were slouched and they were looking down. They were kind of playing with their fingers. They wouldn't want to let go of mom and dad's hand, and that really confused me. I didn't know what was going on. So I went to my boss at the time and I said, hey, can I come in on my day off and just observe? He looked at me like I was crazy, but I told him that it's because I want to become better as a teacher. I want to sit in and I want to learn and I want to become better. He made sure to remind me that he can't pay me for any hours, that I'm not actually scheduled to work, blah, 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 but he ended up saying yes, and I immediately thought, bingo. I showed up on my day off, ready to figure out what was happening in these classrooms that was making the kids feel this way. I felt like an investigator of sorts. And I don't know what I expected. I think I expected to see the teachers making the kids do push-ups or something, or yelling at them, or something crazy, but it was the 21st century, so that was not the case, and thankfully so. What I did see, however, was something much more subtle. All of these teachers expected these kids to practice. And on the surface, it doesn't sound bad, harmless even. After all, if you don't practice, you won't get better. We all know this. But these teachers expected these kids, once again 8, 9-year-olds, to come home after a long day of school, sit down and practice every single day for an hour, much like a college student would. Not to go outside or ride a bike or play Fortnite or whatever the kids are doing nowadays, but once again to sit down and drill their instrument. I was 16 at the time, so the idea that you're coming into your music class and you're not excited, so much so that you're scared and you're nervous and you don't want to let go of mom and dad's hand, that baffled me. I did not understand it. I was closer to these kids in age than their teachers were, so I remembered vividly what it was like to come home after a day of school and just want to be a kid. Anything else other than another teacher-assigned chore. This was common sense to me. But for some reason, none of the teachers seemed to understand that. So when they didn't practice as much as the teachers expected them to, when they didn't meet these expectations, they weren't met with curiosity or adjustment. They were met with disappointment. The teachers were too busy sticking to the old, traditional way of teaching, the one where you prioritize practice and you keep reminding your students that if you don't practice, you won't get better, and that's the problem. The kids at that point in their lives don't want to get better. Number one on their agenda when they're learning this instrument and they find it fun is not get better. Once again, let me remind you, that's what a college student's goal is. You see, there's about 2 reasons why a student under the age of 15 is learning an instrument. One, and the most common, is because mom and dad signed them up and they want them to be a musician. Number 2, this one's much better, of course, is something piqued their interest. Whether it be Lindsey Sterling on YouTube wanting to play violin, or Squidward playing the clarinet on SpongeBob, you tell mom and dad, I really want to learn this, and they sign you up for music lessons. And it's much harder than I thought. Either way, they're not here because they're trying to win a Grammy. They're here because they're curious, or someone told them to be. Kids don't fall in love with music through pressure. They fall in love with it through play. It's like they're teaching miniature adults and not kids. That realization changes everything. You don't teach to make the next great musician, you teach to introduce joy. We don't teach to perfect, you teach to inspire. So if it takes us 1 month to get through a little etude in your little music book, that's fine. If it takes us 3 months to get to one little tiny easy song, that is also fine because you were a kid and not a college student. I'm not against practice. I'm against expecting blind discipline from a student who does not yet have a reason to care. So if you want to take a little break during your lesson and you want to show me the cute little dog that you got earlier that week, let's do it. If you want to take a break in our lesson to show me a cool song that you heard earlier in the day, once again, let's do it. And as I kept teaching, both at the music store and in students' homes, word started to spread. I gained student after student because parents began to see a true change in their kids. I would very often get phone calls or texts along the lines of, "Hey, my daughter started to learn piano, and after 4 months she quit. Can you try with them?" Yeah, and every time the story was familiar. It was a kid who didn't need more pressure. They just needed someone to make music feel fun. By the time I was 18, I had over 60 students on my weekly schedule, 50 more on waitlist, and no time left to teach at the music store. So I left, and I decided to take all my time to just teaching privately. For the next few years, I taught from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., 7 days a week. And music teaching was basically my entire life. By the time I was done with this, I had worked with over 500 students. So I made a decision. This way of teaching, the one rooted in joy and not perfection, needed to spread. When I built my music school, I built it around one founding principle: foster the love of music first, and the rest will follow. So you know that 8-year-old who just won't practice, but it likes Sonic. So when it comes to the next music lesson and you play the new Sonic song with the sheet music, watch the fire in their eyes. Or that 16-year-old who comes to you and he's learning guitar and he says, "Hey, I really want to learn this song because my crush is going to be in the audience and I really want to impress her." Watch him practice. You see, that's the magic of inspiration. It does not need constant reminders. It doesn't need guilt. It just needs relevance. And with speeches like these, I often get a common criticism. So are we just babysitting now in the music lessons? No, we're not babysitting. We're planting seeds. We're showing students that music is not just another chore or a checklist. We're showing them that it's a place where you can feel something, where you can learn something wholly and safely. Where you can be frustrated, you can be mad, you can be upset, and you can show me things all in the same place. And no, not every student will become a professional musician. But if you can be the reason they fall in love with music, that love can last a lifetime. Not because their posture is perfect, but because someone made it matter. So be that someone. Be the reason they play with joy and not fear. Be the reason they grow with confidence and not pressure. And finally, be the reason they walk into their lesson smiling. I promise, the time to make their posture perfect will come. But first, make them fall in love with playing, because they're kids. Even if it means that one day, they may need many, many chiropractic appointments. My name is Goran Ivanov. Thank you.